Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I'm Simply G, and today I'm going to be showing off all of the manga that I got for April. There's quite a bit here, quite a few volumes from particular series, so rather than spend too long on this intro, I'll get straight into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to start with some art books. The first one being the second season illustration collection for Fruits Basket 2019. Like with the first one of these in the series, these are a bunch of illustrations that were posted to Twitter by the mangaka with the release of each weekly episode. And so it kind of, like the sketch, correlates to whatever episode's going on. And it's for all of the second season. So, like, you know, that's good. Good stuff. I like Fruits Basket. I'm really enjoying this new adaptation. There's no real deeper meaning aside from I don't have any art books from Takuya Sensei, so I thought that, you know, this would be a good opportunity. They're super cheap as well because obviously they're little, and it's just a great addition to what is a really solid new adaptation of this classic shoujo as well. We have an art book that I've been really wanting, and this is The Rose of Versailles art book by Ryoko Ikeda. Obviously it's a hardcover book collecting various artworks from the classic shoujo manga, Rose of Versailles. Some beautiful pieces here, just phenomenal coloring. I just adore this 70s shoujo style. It's just gorgeous. And not super, I mean, it's probably more expensive generally than an art book of this length. But this is, you know, I love Ikeda's stuff. I love Rose of Versailles. I love 70s shoujo in general. This is a no-brainer. And at the back, you can see it is the 2016 reprint. I'm sure this has been reprinted a lot of times because it is a classic and beloved and a series that persists within the Japanese popular culture ever since its initial run. And yeah, I don't have any Ikeda books at like art books, so I took the opportunity to finally pick this one up when I was buying some other art books from Japan. We have a recently released art book from one of my favorite mangaka, and that is the Silver Spoon illustrations by Romu Arakawa. This obviously is a bunch of illustrations from the hit agricultural coming-of-age comedy series, Silver Spoon, about a city boy who decides to go to an agricultural high school in order to escape the expectations of his family and to find himself and his shenanigans along with his classmates, and learning about the agricultural industry and farming and food and coming to terms with what he wants to do as well, discovering for himself something he wants to do outside of family expectations. It is a lovely little art book, and I love Arakawa's manga anyway. I'm a huge Fullmetal Alchemist fan. I've said it though before that Silver Spoon is definitely her magnum opus. It's a story I think that only she would be able to tell. And it feels a little bit more genuine coming from her, because if you didn't know, Arakawa does have, her family has a history in dairy farming, so she grew up on a dairy farm. She's obviously intimately familiar with the ins and outs of everything that goes into that, and it makes the difference. It really does. Plus, she's just really funny, like amazingly funny. I love the series a whole bunch, and when I heard that there was an art book, my wonderful friend Rin on Twitter let me know that there was an art book, and I was like, yep, I that shall be mine. And so I placed an order. Really happy to have this. And I was a little bit concerned as well, because I didn't know whether or not Silver Spoon would get an art book, because obviously general popularity of Silver Spoon versus Full Metal Alchemist is very different. In saying that, though, Silver Spoon is still popular, so maybe that's an incorrect sentiment, but I'm happy we got this nonetheless. The last art book that I got for this month was another one. I don't actually own this manga yet. I don't own this manga. I have read all of this manga, though. I've watched all of the anime adaptation of this series so far. Another new release art book, and that is the Demon Slayer art book. Obviously collecting artwork from the complete manga series of Demon Slayer, or Kimetsu no Yaiba. And I really enjoy, I think that the mangaka has a really distinctive art style. It's not one that will necessarily appeal to everyone, but obviously this series is massively popular. I don't think kind of quirky art style has impacted in any case. This is a fun, solid action, I guess horror shonen maybe. Again, like everything, it has its problems, but it's such a huge cultural phenomena, and I do think that its popularity makes sense. It is fairly well deserved. I think Tanjiro is a really wonderful protagonist. I think the Hashira are really interesting, diverse cast. There's a lot going on, and I think it understands that from the get-go that the demon-human conflict isn't inherently black and white. It's fun. It's good. The anime really helped, especially being done by Ufotable. It really captured the dynamic action within the series, and I like it a lot. There's a lot of really good moments. It's, it's not gonna. It's an action shonen. It's a jump series. It's not the best, most brilliant thing that's ever made, but I also think people who are upset at its popularity are silly and don't understand why children like things and why things get popular and how things get popular. And if you're that upset that Kimetsu no Yaiba Demon Slayer is doing so well, then just ignore it. Why? Literally, why? Why should that upset you? I don't understand people who need their favorite things to be the most popular things. I mean, obviously I'm biased because all of my favorite things are never the most popular things. Although in saying that, a lot of my favorites are very popular series, but I don't need my favorite series to be One Piece levels of popularity to feel good about myself or to feel confident in reading them. I'll just read them and hope that other people also enjoy it. Demon Slayer is fun. I think it manages the horror aspect really well. I think it manages Tanjiro's empathetic nature incredibly well. I think that there's a lot of fun to be had with the cast. Zenitsu's irritating as all get out, honestly, but in manga, when he's screaming, you don't have to hear it. You just, in your brain, kind of frazzle it down to a normal talking level. You can filter that part. But there is a lot of good in Demon Slayer. It makes perfect sense to me as to why it is so popular. And those who can't understand that as well, I think they're just old. They're stuck in their own nostalgia, And I feel like if they revisited some of their favorite things from when they were 12 years old, they'd be like, oh, this wasn't as good as what I remembered it. Without the rose-tinted nostalgia goggles on. So yeah, that's my weird little Demon Slayer rant. But this art book is really lovely. Really happy to have it. I hope for Sensei's health and mental well-being in the coming years. I hope they have the opportunity to make another series on their own terms and not mired by the popularity that kind of inexplicitly came out of them, the series running in Jump and the anime. And I hope that their life finds some peace, because it's sad that the series sort of saw a rushed conclusion towards the end because of outside factors and just the mental strain being massively popular has. Yeah. Demon Slayer art book. Happy to have it. And at some point I may buy the manga. I have plans to get the anime once it's not like separate. I'll just buy like season collections versus like 12 episode sets. I'm patient. It's not gonna disappear from this world in the 6 months, 18 months, 2 years it takes to get a re-release. Because action shonen are fun and fine, but they're not like must immediately get, must have the fanciest edition in my collection. These aren't the type of series that these are. So onto the manga. First and foremost, we have the Riso edition of Ripples by Hagiwara. This is a beautiful special edition. Comes with 2 different postcards, but is, as you can see, done with Riso printing. So you've got the beautiful blue, teal, and the red, and both this and the normal, like the general release, which is a larger trim size, by the way, is still available from Glacier Bay Books. I already own the prior, like the other edition of this. That's the one that I ordered when it went up for pre-order. So I actually wasn't expecting this book. I had, I guess, expressed my interest on buying this book previously. I love Glacier Bay. I think people who've been around my channel for a little while will know that I own every single one of their print releases. I'm very excited for a lot of their upcoming titles. I do have some reviews and things coming for their works soon as well. But I had mentioned that I did want to get this edition at some point, and because I'm a crazy person like that, I just couldn't, it wasn't really in the budget. It wasn't a super high priority for me, and at the same time I was like, well, I already own the comic, so maybe I'll just, leave it. But with my last order from Glacier Bay, the person who runs it, they very kindly sent this along with everything else that I had purchased, because I'm somewhat close, like I speak to them on a somewhat regular basis. As I said, I'm a huge fan of their catalog as of right now, and I don't see that changing in the future either. So I am really appreciative. I was shocked when I saw this in my package full of beautiful books that I had paid for. And I highly, this is a phenomenal little comic in itself. It's very introspective. It's somewhat of a avant-garde look at the search for connection. It's beautiful. Whether it's this edition or the other like general edition that they've put out, Glacier Bay have put out, I cannot encourage this series enough or this book enough, because it is really beautiful, in the same vein as how all of Glacier Bay's books have just been phenomenal. The quality of the actual book itself, the print quality, just how the translation and lettering and everything like that is done. For such a small boutique publisher who does focus on these sort of alternative indie avant-garde stories, stuff that is outside of the norm of a typical manga publisher, I think it's important to highlight and emphasize just how amazing it is that we've gotten such high quality works from Glacier Bay, which kind of wasn't really in question, but it's phenomenal what the small team has done. That publisher, the consistent amazing quality of all of their books, and I know for one that I will continue to be supporting them. I just love everything that they put out so much, and it's always worth the money. So this was a bit of a personal surprise for me, but the comic itself is phenomenal, and I do highly recommend you pick it up if you have the chance. Next is one of Glacier Bay's most recent titles. Not the most recent as of recording, because they've opened pre-orders for their next print book. But international shipping is so slow for me. Perhaps other people have had this book for a little while now, but this is Children of Mootown by Masamura Jushiichi. This is a single volume book, again with a beautiful postcard in it, about a housing development that was built sort of post-war, in this expectation that the economy and society would be healing and growing after World War II, but now in the modern day or current era is kind of fallen out of people's minds. There's really no one there except for families, legacy families, the elderly. Nobody cares too much governmentally to keep it at a level or that people want to, that the quality of life is suitable. So it's part of like this forgotten aspect of society, and then criminal gangs and organized crime run rampant in the area. So one of the younger members, who's in late 20s, early 30s, is doing his best to try and reinvigorate his home, this building development, this housing development, uplift the people living there, bring a better quality of life. But in doing so, he's kind of it's a desperate situation, so he's falling into a lot of traps. He's putting himself in a lot of danger. He's putting himself at the mercy of people and groups who don't care about him, don't care about what happens to this place, would much prefer the criminal and just bigoted and classist and just broken parts of society to continue, for this little apartment block to continue as it has been, where nobody cares and thus you can get away with anything. It's really, really wonderful. Much smarter people than I have made the comparison with this book to Taya Matsumoto's Black and White or Tek on Concrete. It does definitely have that feel of us against the world or us against a broken society. The actual organized crime aspect of it, this desperation from one half of a group to do anything it takes to for their kind of idea of a greater good, and then the other half of that group or the pair um, kind of desperately encouraging that the other person to value themselves and value their own life. And really it asks the question of like, how far will you go to protect things that are important to you, and how is it different, or like what's the difference when that's a person versus an idea or a community or a larger population, a larger segment of society, something a little less human and a little bit more tangentially like other. It's really, really good. I enjoyed this immensely. I love black and white Tekken Concrete, so it's not a surprise that I like this. And obviously they're not completely synonymous, but they definitely have similar feels. Obviously the characters in this are much older than those in Taya Matsumoto's manga, but this, I think, captures that desperation, the two sides of a situation really, really well. And I think there's a really freeing ending to this. I think we don't really know what happens insofar as whether things all work out, whether a situation gets better or worse, whether or not things are fixed through the actions in this book, but you don't need that, because it's more so about the personal journey, the human story of the people who are fighting so hard or working towards that idea. It is so good. It's so good. I loved it. Yeah, I highly encourage you to pick this up, again, from Glacier Bay Books. I know some independent comic shops and things, both in the US and internationally, have gotten this, so there are some copies floating around if you're not in the US, or you can just be a crazy person like myself and pay for the international shipping, regardless of cost. Yeah, just phenomenal. There's also a digital edition as well if you can't afford to be shipping books across the world. I definitely understand that sentiment too. There's a lot of different options for people to read this series, and I really encourage you to do so. This creator, Maimura Jushiichi, has another title, Bakuchan, which is currently, I don't know if it's still free on Kindle, but it has been released in English on Kindle across like every Amazon platform. And for a little while, it may still be available for free. So if you enjoy this, definitely give Bakuchan a look. If you enjoyed that, then definitely give Children of Mootown a look, because they are both great and wonderful, and really, really happy to see the continuing trend of just phenomenal stuff being licensed and released in English by Glacier Bay. Another Glacier Bay book, a continuation of, I think, their first series in print, and that is the Lullaby. So this is the third in Shika Shinosuke's like Sleepy Child series, which talks about dreams and grief and missing people important to you and reconnecting through dreams. It's really whimsical, a little bit magical. It does definitely capitalize on the dreamlike quality. This particular entry into the series is about this girl on the cover who plays the violin, who has a lot of sadness, a lot of issues relating to abandonment. Her father was a professional violinist and had died, previously. Her mother now travels the world for work and isn't home very long, so it's that the complicated feeling that this character has with her family, and then also with music and her father's violin and her own interest in playing the violin. And it's just, oh, it's punchy insofar as like it will hit you pretty good with those emotions. Like with the rest in the series, it's not a long book. It's not there's no huge grand epic plot or anything that you're following with these entries, but I do think it's just poignantly beautiful, a little bit bittersweet, and has been able to accurately capture this feeling of loneliness that sometimes wells up from grief, from that missed connection, the loss of someone important in your life, is just done really, really well. All of these little books, they're all still available, I believe, from Glacier Bay. Not super expensive. Again, if you like independent, self-published comics, stuff like that, then this is definitely worth a look. And they're just beautiful quality, as always, from Glacier Bay. So, yeah, definitely check it out. There are a couple comics. I'm going to group them together just because they're from the same creator. I also bought these from Glacier Bay. They weren't released by Glacier Bay. They were just stocked on their web store. And, so this is 2 comics from... Oh, which way do these go? This is Homeroom and My Friend's Jeffrey by Luke Stewart. Luke Stewart is a American comic creator. I think pretty obvious from this character art, especially very influenced by Inio Asano. And so I was following him on social media for a little while whilst he was writing This is Homeroom, which if you read this comic in particular, you can see where his chronic health issues did have affected how this book was made. And so the longer or the more you get into it, the story continues just in a rougher version. So it's interesting, obviously a labor of love. Lots of little additional things with this particular book, and with both of them really. So This is Homeroom is about a girl called Doc who keeps trying to talk about how she met her friend to these little like bean creatures in homeroom after school. Where are they? Yeah, these little weird things. She keeps trying to tell them the story. They keep interrupting her. She keeps getting into fights and getting kicked out of class after school's done. And it's just kind of reiterations of that and her just desperately trying to tell the story, but keep getting aggravated because these little bean animal creatures keep annoying her and trying to overtake her and become the storyteller and do all sorts of things. So this is Homeroom. Short, sweet, a little bit abstract. I don't think these stories are necessarily for everyone, but I do think that it's definitely a solid read. Very Asano-esque, as I said. My Friend Jeffrey is a little bit more, I think, approachable, maybe, for people. So this follows a teenage boy who his imaginary friend still hangs around with him. And he's been around since the untimely death of his father in his youth. And now as a teenager, he's kind of feeling like he's grown out of needing this imaginary friend or having him hang around and the impact it's having on his life. But ultimately, the importance of his friend Jeffrey and what it represents, how he kind of embodies this element of the need to grow up, or the childhood trauma, or the need for support in a very traumatic experience, grief, childhood grief, stuff like that. It's good. It's definitely, I liked My Friend Jeffrey a little bit more than This Is Homeroom, just because it's a little more, like, it takes less amount of work to unpack everything in My Friend Jeffrey, but still really, really resonant, hard-hitting, very good. If you do enjoy Asano's stuff, especially stuff like Goodnight Pun Pun, or Solonin, or Dead Dead Demons, Dead Destruction, etc., would encourage you to check out Luke Stewart's stuff. He's very talented. He, along with his comic creation, has an apparel line, has a couple different things, a couple different projects that he works on, and I definitely would encourage you to check his work out if it looks like something that would interest you. We have a Square Enix book. This is volume 1 of the Apothecary Diaries manga adaptation, story based off of Natsu Hyuga's light novel of the same name. Art by Neko Kurage, compiled by Itsuki Nanao, and character design by Toko Shino. This is I enjoy this a lot. I really, really love the light novel series, and I actually came into the manga first, just because this was released first. Beautiful. It is about a young girl, or teenage girl, who was basically kidnapped, sold to the high court, the emperor and such, as a servant, a peasant girl, but who personally is very interested in medicines and poisons, things like that. Prior to her kidnapping, she was considering, or very much so, dedicated to being a apothecarian, an old-timey doctor, as it were. And as she's come into the court, she kind of just tries to lay low and not cause too much trouble, and she doesn't want to enter sort of the harem as a concubine, so she pretends that she doesn't know how to read, all these sorts of things, but she's quickly discovered as being, a little bit more than what she seems by certain members of the court, when she's starting to notice various illnesses and how they can fix them, certain poisoning plots, things like that. It's really, really, really good. I really enjoy this series. I think volume 2 is already out. My local comic store doesn't have it yet, so that's why I do not have volume 2 yet. I read the first volume digitally a while ago and was like, wow, that was great. I want this. And I'm definitely would also encourage you to read the novels. Those have been licensed by J Novel Club, digital only as of right now, but I'd be very surprised if it didn't see its way to print at some point. So this is another Square Enix books title that I'd heard of the Apothecary Diaries because of how popular the novels are in Japan and how well they're doing. They've won a ton of awards, stuff like that. But Square Enix, for me at least, a lot of my favorite titles from them are stuff that I'd never heard of before. There's a lot of stuff that I had heard of before, and I'm very excited that they licensed and have released. But I think, and it may be the same in Japan as well, their most notable titles don't really have anything to do with Square Enix properties, obviously, although they do have plenty of that too. And as a relatively new publisher to the English market, They've really chosen sort of the best of their best of their titles to be, licensed and released. And yeah, it's just been overwhelmingly positive. It's been a good experience so far. And the Apothecary Diaries, definitely, give it a shot if it sounds like your thing, especially if you like strong female lead characters. It's somewhat of a there's no romance aspect, but it does remind me of stuff like Snow White with the red hair, of a self-assured and dedicated young woman who's wanting to further and continue her career in medicine, and being able to prove herself in unlikely circumstances or unexpected circumstances. As I said, there's not really that romance aspect in the Apothecary Diaries, or at least not nearly as blatant and obvious and crucial to the plot as compared to Snow White with the red hair. But it is there's a familiar, similar vibe. Although again, this is much more of a Eastern, like Asian influence setting versus like a European Western sort of kingdom setting. So that's pretty cool in of itself as well. Definitely worth the read, and I'm super happy that this beautiful manga series has been licensed. We have some shoujo beat titles. The first being volume 45 of Skip Beat by Yoshiki Nakamura. This is a romantic comedy about a teenage girl called Kyoko who, after her heart was broken by the boy that she liked, that she followed to Tokyo to become like a famous singer, famous person. He dumped her. Well, actually, she overheard him bad-mouthing her, saying that she was like stupid and whatever. And so for revenge, her heartbroken, she gets mad. She gets mad and angry, and she's like, "I'll show you. How dare you say that about me? I'm going to become doubly as famous as you are, and then you'll be eating your words." So it's in part a revenge story, in part a romance, because she decides to pursue her dream of becoming famous, or a more famous person than her ex. And in doing so, she joins a rival talent agency, but she doesn't have any like inherently obvious natural talents. She's not like a super amazing singer or dancer or whatever else, but she joins this talent agency, of which their top star is like the number one actor, like famous person in Japan amongst the young people, and who is also her ex-boyfriend's biggest rival. He's always like trying to one up this guy who's on the cover. And she kind of didn't even realize that, but so there's a romance. This is kind of a weird slow burn, but it's so funny. Like, if nothing else, the humor of this series is worth reading it for. The art is not great. I don't know how at 45 volumes there's still a element of, I don't know, amateurity with this, but it's one of those series that, regardless of art, is just so good. The writing is wonderful. The characters are all wonderful. I think there's a lot of really fun moments in here. It really dives into the talent industry. So basically, Kyoko, she's brought into this talent agency on this probationary period. She joins this. She isn't hired immediately because the owner, the guy in charge, can tell that she doesn't understand or feel love anymore, which is a crucial a crucial thing for a talent to have, right? You need to encourage or to prove that, you know, you're in love with an audience or whatever. So he hires her on this basis that she's part of the Love Me team, and where they do odd jobs and like whatever work they're assigned, and they have to try and earn Love Me points. And once they have a certain level of points and they can prove that they've learned the meaning of love, then they can become like full talentos or actresses or whatever else it is that they want. Yeah, it's a funny series. Kyoko's great. Her little revenge monster fantasy things are fun. The romance aspect, it is, the main romance is a like age gap. I think this actor guy's like 21, but where she's 16, 17, so a little bit iffy, but the way that they play it isn't terrible, and there's enough to get invested in otherwise, that if you're irked by that initially, and the way they present it, there's a lot of like backstory with these two characters as well, outside of just what's initially introduced. But there's a lot to really enjoy with the series regardless of that element too. Yeah, Skip Beat, it's one that like I didn't discover until a couple years ago. It's a series that I actually like, I'd heard of it, but I never really wanted to get into it. But with the anime Kickstarter that Pied Piper did for a English dub and full release for the series, it encouraged me to watch the series streaming for the first time to see if I wanted to back the Kickstarter. And I fell in love with this series. I think my sister and I watched all 25 episodes in like a day and a half, maybe just one day. It was that good. It was that funny, like immediately really charming and interesting and wonderful. But sadly, the anime is very unfinished. And then from there, kind of coincidentally, there was a really large sale on Viz Manga from a stocking distributor here, and so I was able to pick up volumes 1 to like 36 or 37, might have been the most recent volume, all at once for a very good price. And I've been following it as it's come out in English since. It's really, really good. It's really good. I never expected to love it as much as I do, to fall so immediately in love with it. I thought that like the age gap aspect would annoy me. It really doesn't. I thought that it, like, the premise would get annoying. The Kyoko as a protagonist may get a little bit grating on the nerves. She absolutely doesn't. And I'm very wary of like positive portrayals of the talent industry and like being an actor in Hollywood and all sorts of things. And it really doesn't fall into that either. It's just, it's fun, it's funny, it has some really hard-hitting dramatic moments, and overall, it's just really good. And even though, like, the art as well, like, is something that is not wonderful, I think you kind of get used to it not being great, and then when you come back to it after a while, you're like, oh my god, oh yeah, whoops. Or it'll be fine, and then something particularly broken will happen, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a thing. But it's also the story is so good that it's an element that doesn't bother you because of the quality of the writing and characters and everything else. I don't know, man. Skip Beat's great, and I think it's super funny, and I think it's one that a lot of people would enjoy if they gave it a shot. Shoujo Beat title that I got for this month was Natsume's Book of Friends, Volume 25 by Yuki Midorikawa. This is, just continuing the supernatural, bittersweet, poignant stories of Takashi Natsume as he helps yokai with their problems, continues to return names to yokai that his grandmother had taken in her youth, whilst also trying to learn more about his grandmother. The only connection to his family that he really has is through this Book of Friends. So if you don't know anything about Natsume's Book of Friends, it's about a teenage boy who was orphaned very young in life. He has the ability to see spirits, yokai, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. Not ghosts in the European sense, but, you know, yokai, ayakashi, etc. And because of that, he was shuffled between households very regularly during his childhood, because he would react to things that other people couldn't see. So a lot of his extended family, didn't want to have to deal with that. You know, there's a discussion to be had on the allegory of mental illness and the fostering and adoption system and things like that. So anyway, he gets taken in by a very distant relative of his father's, the Fujiwaras. He goes to live with them, and it coincidentally is the neighborhood that his grandmother grew up in her youth. His grandmother, he hasn't heard very positive things about, but he discovers from the local yokai that she was also able to see spirits, which is why she was shunned by the town for being strange and unusual and someone that they couldn't understand. And then he discovers, after unexpectedly freeing this very large, powerful Ayakashi, Madara, who then becomes his, through some various deal having, becomes his bodyguard in order to protect the Book of Friends, which is a book containing the names of various yokai, and having yokai's name gives you power over them. So he's now returning said names to yokai, whilst learning more about himself, learning more about Reiko, his grandmother, learning more about what he wants his relationship to be with both humans and yokai, finally being in a position comfortable enough to examine this aspect of his life, of himself, that he's always been afraid of, that has always been a very negative experience, now being something that is connecting him to so many people and to so many new experiences, and learning for the first time how to be himself in a safe environment. It's just it's so good with people who are accepting of him, even if they don't inherently understand his circumstances, his experiences. It's just, I love Natsume's Book of Friends so much. I wax poetic about this series constantly. Right now, there's 25 volumes in English. Obviously, this is the most recent one. There's 6 seasons of anime. There's movies. There's all sorts of things, and it's a hugely popular series in Japan. You can tell because there's immense merchandising of Nyanko Sensei, the ugly cat mascot here. That is Natsume's cat / bodyguard / I guess father or older brother figure as well. Well, maybe grandfatherly figure in his life. It's just, it's so good. Definitely try Natsume's Book of Friends out. I think it's one that, I've said it before, I'll say it 1,000 times more. It appeals to everyone. It's a hugely popular series in Japan because everyone from 5-year-olds to 95-year-olds can read it. It's incredibly emotionally genuine. It has such heart, such a universal feeling to the emotions within it. And it doesn't, for as bittersweet and as terrible circumstances that Takashi has come from, and for everything that he's experienced up until this point, it's beautiful in that he's able to still to find happiness, to not have let that make him a cold or unfeeling or awful, terrible, hurtful person. He's experienced a lot of bad in his life, but it's not made him into someone who thus thinks it's okay to hurt other people, to reject other people. For early on in the series, and throughout his younger years, there was always a distance between him and quote-unquote normal people, but it wasn't a self-inflicted distance. It was one that, in a way, it's kind of like the hedgehog's dilemma of trying to protect yourself, and not realizing that you're, in doing so, getting close to people, the idea of like getting close to people and hurting them. But Takashi isn't that. You know, there really isn't people will get hurt in relationships regardless, and he's such a kind, caring, loving guy who hasn't had a huge opportunity to have that reciprocated throughout his life. And so it's only now, within the safety of this small town, his new friends, the amazing Fujiwaras, his like foster parents, and Nyanko Sensei and the Book of Friends, that he's able to finally be comfortable in himself, be comfortable building new relationships with people and yokai that he never expected. And if this series doesn't make you cry, then you are a stronger person than I. I highly recommend the anime in particular. It's phenomenal. And yeah, Natsume's Book of Friends, beautiful, continues to be amazing at everything that it does. And I am always happy whenever we get a volume of this. About Natsume is a pretty good segue into this next series, of which I bought the entirety of the series. I bought a lot off of eBay because... Okay, well, so this is Holic by Clamp. This is the story of a teenage boy, Watanuki, here on the cover, who is able to see spirits, ghosts, ayakashi, whatever you want to call them, and as such, has had a pretty complicated and tough life. Because of that, he was orphaned at a very young age. He's now living on his own, but he's been shuffled between a couple different relatives. And one day, whilst trying to run away from a bunch of spirits in the shopping district, he finds himself outside of a peculiar store. Very interesting. Hadn't seen it before. And despite his own protests to what is happening, his feet very literally drag him into the store, to which he is introduced to Yuko, this beautiful, mysterious woman who calls herself a witch, not only a witch, a dimensional witch, who tells him that she's the store's owner, and it's a store that is only ever able to be seen by the people, or found by the people who need it most, and she's able to fix any problem, grant any wish that he would like, with a cost. He's a bit like, that's weird and wild, and no thanks. This sounds like a scam. But after a moment of convincing him, she tells him, well, I can help get rid of you being able to see spirits. Is that something you're interested in? He says, okay, yes, definitely. But for fair payment of that wish, of which she she won't grant until payment is received. She says, well, you will come work at my store. That'll be your payment. And then I'll get rid of your ability to see spirits. And he says, reluctantly, alrighty. He's definitely someone, because he's lived on his own for so long, because he's been self-reliant for so long. He's a very accomplished chef, a good cook. And she just basically uses him as a gopher to get groceries, to make her delicious meals, to pour her drinks, things like that, to lug the heavy stuff when she goes shopping, etc., etc., etc. So this series, each chapter is quite self-contained. There's a couple that are like multiple chapter story arcs, but typically about a customer who has a problem. Yuko tells them how they can fix it, and oftentimes that advice isn't taken. And it's quite, like, there's quite a sinister tone and uneasiness. This very obvious representation of, just because you have an information, or just because people have told you how to get better or fix a problem, doesn't inherently mean that you will take that advice, you will follow those instructions. You have to be, you yourself have to be committed to change for any change to happen, and for your life to get better, or for you to fix the problem that is annoying you. So yes, it's interesting to think about now, because I really think I haven't read Holic before. I hadn't read Holic before buying this. I've now read about halfway through the series, and love it. I knew I would. But I had watched the anime, and the anime was one of my very first series that I watched in my anime watching career. And it's kind of interesting to see how, I guess, influential this series was on my tastes. Thinking about, obviously, my interest in yokai and supernatural stories and creepy supernatural stories, how much of this series, I think, influenced that, or made me realize that, which I didn't even think about or remember until having re-experienced this story through the manga. So, for those who've followed my channel, especially my live streams that I do weekly, you know that I have a very complicated relationship with Clamp. I have great respect for them as a group, and as people, and as creators, but a lot of times I have a lot of problems with the writing, with just a lot of things. I'm not their biggest fan, sorry to say, but Holic is by far, in my opinion, their best work. It's a shame that the sequel has been on hiatus for so long, but the characters, Watanuki and Yuko, of course, but also the other main supporting cast, Domaki and Himawari, are all very interesting, wonderfully done. I think there's just something with a little bit more sustenance, or I don't know. It just obviously appeals to my particular interests more so than a lot of their other titles. I think the art is more consistent. I think the atmospheric tone is more consistent with how it balances the comedy and the very dark themes of a lot of these stories. And it does, and also, despite being a directly linked and directly referenced series to Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles, which was running at the same time and legitimately has like crossover chapters between the two, this feels like the least referencey of Clamp's manga as well, at least their later works, because obviously their first works aren't filled with references to their catalog because they didn't have a catalog at that point. But man, it's interesting to see or to think about how much Holic impacted me as a fan and was formative to my tastes, and I didn't even think about it. I mean, I think I already had the interest in folklore and stuff like that, but this one I think sparked my interest or made me aware of the possibilities of like supernatural, yokai, manga, and anime when I was entering the hobby. So this was a long time coming, I think. I was happy to get all 19 volumes of the series all at once. So I've been able to read it pretty much all at once as well. Yeah, gorgeous, beautiful. These Del Rey singles have been out of print for a very long time. Obviously, this is the publisher that predates Kodansha in English. And Kodansha put out 3-in-1 omnibus editions of this, which I think are mostly out of print. I don't really remember. But you can also still buy the series digitally if you so wish. And despite now owning the entirety of the series, the original series at least, in singles, if Kodansha wanted to put out a fancy edition of this series, I absolutely would buy it, in the vein of like Cardcaptor Sakura or Chobits or, you know, Magic Knight Rayearth, stuff like that. I absolutely would spend the money because this is the Clamp stuff that I enjoy. This is the Clamp book that I am like, yes, thank you, give me more of this, and I hope one day they will return to Holic Grey, because I don't really care about Cardcaptor Sakura Clear Card, but I do care about Holic. So I have a deep self-interest in seeing the continuation of this work versus any of their other like tentpole titles. Holic, give it a shot. I think the anime is still available from Funimation, like in various like budget editions, DVD only. There's also a film which I think is also DVD only. I think it released initially with a Blu-ray, but that's long out of print. And that also has a crossover episode with Tsubasa. The anime isn't like fabulous. I don't think any animation-wise movement is able to kind of capture the feel, the tone, the art style of Holic. It would take a very dedicated team working very, very, very hard on capturing the style. So it doesn't look the best, but it is a pretty solid little adaptation of stuff. You know, you get plenty of the stories. But yeah, definitely try to track this one down if it sounds like something you're interested in. And even if you're not a fan of like a majority of Clamp stuff, like I'm not. Continuing with the supernatural manga, and I think this is the only Yen Press title that I got for the month. This is volume 8 of Toilet Bound Hanako-kun by Aida Iro. This is the ongoing story of a teenage girl called Nene who, after summoning the school mystery number 7, Toilet Bound Hanako-san, discovers that instead of being the ghost of a little girl forever tied to a toilet in the girl's bathroom, it is in fact the ghost of a teenage boy who is known as Hanako-kun. He's the head of the 7 mysteries at her school, so he kind of keeps the peace, makes sure that they're all behaving themselves, not causing too much trouble. And through various circumstances, she becomes his assistant, helps him with all of the various goings on, because things keep going wrong. The school mystery is stuff. There's some stuff happening. They quickly become friends, maybe more. There's the introduction of one of the middle school students who comes from a very elite exorcism family, whose older brother is the school, like the student body president, very popular, very attractive. And the conflict that brings with the student council and the supernaturals who live in the school. There's also a larger conspiracy in that Hanako is the peacemaker, obviously, or like he keeps everything running smoothly. Supernaturals don't impose too much trouble on humans, and humans not imposing too much trouble on the supernaturals. But at the same time, there's another group within the school who are trying to encourage unease and problems and, upset between the two groups. And for some reason, I mean, we know the reason now at this point, but for some reason, there's another ghostly boy who looks identical to hanako-kun. And so what is the mystery behind that? We know at this point what the mystery is behind that. But this, oh my goodness, this series just keeps getting better and better. I love this series so much. It had a great anime adaptation just recently. I only adapted the first 5-ish volumes, which is fine. That's not a bad thing. So you do get lots of content in that, and they do manage to capture a lot of the fun, quirky character style in the anime too. But man, the plot, the drama, suspense, tension, this foreboding atmosphere amidst a very funny, very likable, very sweet series is just done really, really well. I am extremely worried for all of these kids, even the dead ones, because these ghosts deserve happiness too, damn it. But also Nene, there's some stuff going on there, and I'm very concerned. And the the middle school boy who kind of hangs around them is also their friend. Oh man, I feel for him. There's a lot of heartbreaking moments in this. There's a Tanabata chapter in this one in which Nene kind of gets propelled to the past. And there's a lot going on there. There's so much good stuff in this series. It's so good, and I always want the next volume because it always ends on a cliffhanger, and I hate having to wait. Oh, it's so good. This currently has, I think, 14 volumes in Japanese. It's also currently up to date in English digitally, because Yen Press has been released a solid chunk of it digital only before they announced the print release. And my goodness gracious, this is just, honestly, if you're not reading Toadbound Hanako-kun, whether it's because the title kind of irked you, or you don't think that, or maybe the cover style, the character design kind of threw you off or whatever, I would encourage you to give it a shot nonetheless. If not through the manga, then through the anime. It has so much going for it. The writing is great. The actual shenanigans with these teens, they feel like actual high schoolers. They do dumb shit. everything's very important to them, and in a dramatic teen way, but also they know when they're being silly and when they need to be serious, things like that. It's very, very well done. The supernatural element is done amazingly as well, of course, and really incorporates like the folklore, like magic into it. These ideas of boundaries outside of, you know, the mundane world, stuff like that. I think is just handled really, really well. Plus, it's just so, for me, the art style just makes it so much more memorable, and it just the quality of the writing is so high as well that it just keeps getting better and better and better, and you keep getting more and more engaged, more and more invested. And oh my goodness, it's also really funny. It's hilarious when it wants to be. And not in a typical, like, high school supernatural shenanigans way. It's fun, and these characters feel like friends. I presume everyone who's watching either is a high schooler or was a high schooler, and the good-natured ribbing between friends is very well captured in this series. So that also is some quite enjoyable. But yeah, Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. Don't let the name scare you away. Aida Iro's doing a great job with the series, and I love it. It's super duper good. Lastly, for the like normal trim size manga, we have Tokyo Pop's BL Fans Love My Brother by Mimu Oyamada. Despite having BL in the title, this is not a BL title. This is a comedy series about a university student girl who her brother, I don't know if he's older, I think he might be older, 20-year-old brother has been a shut-in for the past 4 or 5 years. He's incredibly handsome, but is also incredibly socially anxious. He hasn't left the house or his room for, again, several years. But one day she kind of stumbles in to his room and finds him desperate to finish his pages, because she discovers that her brother is actually a very, very popular doujinka, aka a doujin artist, creator, for a particular series called Muscle Academy, something along those lines. And he draws doujin for his favorite ship, which is a BL ship between two very muscular men. And he loves the show, he loves his ship, his OTP, his biases, and he's super, like, very involved in the community, and she doesn't get it. Like, she's not a BL fan, she just doesn't really, it kind of concerns her a little bit, actually, that her very handsome brother locks himself away in his room and draws, like, muscle-bound men in very explicit situations, despite not really knowing his own sexuality. It is not confirmed as to whether he's gay or not. It doesn't really matter. But he's not going to make the deadline in time, and he asks her in desperation if she would help finish the doujin with him, finish drawing, not doing any of the art or anything, but just, you know, backgrounds and inking and stuff like that. And she says, what? And then he's like, I will give you this coupon to this restaurant, this carnivore restaurant in where you have all of this delicious meat, if you help me with this. And she loves meat, so she's like, okay, I will help you, brother, in your time of need. And so through this incident, they kind of grow closer as people. She continues to help him with his doujin. He continues to, like, obviously talk about his interest, and at some point she attends a doujin event as, like, pretending to be her, like, the creator of this work, because her brother obviously doesn't want to leave the house, and also doesn't want to break the illusion that this doujin is being written by a guy. And so through various interactions, through various experiences, the sister learns more about the BL community and Fujoshi and the doujin community as well, and gets, like, understands and gains a greater appreciation for this community that her brother has found himself, even if she doesn't inherently, like, get this couple that he's so interested in, or things like that, and she doesn't really understand his love for the show. Whilst also she's helping her brother to become more comfortable in himself, in his interests, reintegrating him into society without changing him, without asking him to, like, forget his interests or his obsession with Muscle Academy. And it's quite sweet. Like, it's really lovely how these siblings grow closer and are introducing each other to the things that they love, and over time, this girl gaining a better appreciation for what her brother does, gaining her own interest in doujin and BL comics, and her attempts at making her own doujin. And although they're not fabulous, that elation of the process of creation and the pride of having a product that you've created, and finally seeing it and people, interacting with that and buying that, it's so good. It's, like, actually really funny and heartwarming, in a similar vein to, like, a lot of Junko stuff. It's quite self-aware with the BL element, and it's a good-natured ribbing. Like, it doesn't feel mean or judgmental or, like, horrified, anything like that. It's a good time. It's a good time, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Did I show inside? I don't remember if I showed inside. But yeah, it's a one and done little book. I think these characters are great, and it's nice to see a brother-sister relationship that isn't, like, weirdly sexualized. They actually feel like siblings the way they interact with each other, and that inherent support for a sibling, even if you don't understand their interests, not forcing them to change who they are. I think more media with siblings needs to encourage that sort of thing. So yeah, BL Fans Love My Brother by Mimu Oyamada. Another win for Tokyo Pop. Sadly, because again, moral conundrum whenever monetarily supporting Tokyo Pop, but this was a fun time. Is the large trim manga. We have I'll start with this one. So we have another 2 volumes of Fire Punch, volumes 3 and 7. This is Tatsuki Fujimoto's earlier work. Obviously, he's gained a lot of popularity since this, thanks to his series Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is definitely his more popular work, for good reason. There's a lot going on in Fire Punch. It's definitely not a series for everyone. It pushes basically every taboo that there is, and so it's a very hard recommendation to make. But like with all of what I've come to appreciate with Fujimoto's manga is that although initially in your face and again pushing taboos and kind of seeing how far it can take things, Seeing how kind of shocked and maybe disgusted and affronted it can make an audience. The shock value is not really what this series is about. It's not a and again, Chainsaw Man, same thing. If you can get past the initial just like in your face abhorrent, and it's very evocative, both this and Chainsaw Man, of like just the Z level monster movie horror, gore, slash and gore stuff, from like very low budget films. If you can get past that, and Fire Punch, it is asking a lot. Like, if you can get past the cannibalism, the pedophilia, the incest, the animal cruelty, the this, that, and everything else. Just think of an upsetting thing, of a potentially triggering situation or topic, and Fire Punch probably has it. Chainsaw Man has elements of it, not everything, which is not surprising considering that was in Jump. But if you can get past that, there's actually a lot to love about Fujimoto's manga. And I mean, even those elements, there's stuff to love about it, but it's not, none of this is mindless. Nothing that Fujimoto has put out hasn't had reason or a larger message or meaning. It hasn't had a really strong, none of them have been lacking a really strong message about heroes and idolization and fighting for the greater good, and what does that make you when you do become someone else's hero, and how humanity isn't built to be idols, right? Like, there's no perfect person, and you shouldn't act like there is. And that person who is idolized, what happens when they do make mistakes? Or what happens when they do feel this pressure of being perfect constantly? The idea of a infallible human isn't inherently impossible. It's just, and again, fighting for this greater good, maybe going back to Children of Mootown, how much do you sacrifice yourself for a cause, and by the detriment of yourself, and from there the people who care about you, to what end is it then their turn to tell you to value yourself, that the individual is more important than the cause. Maybe that's a weird comparison to make, but just thinking about it, it somewhat fits. So Fire Punch, for those who don't know, is set in a dystopic future in which the world has been enveloped by a never-ending ice age. And so because of this, there's food shortages, the population is tiny comparatively to, before this. And certain humans have developed X-Men-like abilities of just like weird powers. So our main character, he and his sister have been traveling alone after the horrific murder of their parents. They've been traveling together. They're the only two people in each other's world. Again, kind of, this is where the incest comes in somewhat. But both of them have healing abilities. Regenerative abilities, I should say. And although the brothers is much more is a much stronger, faster ability versus the sister. And we start the story where he is cutting off limbs off of himself to offer to the townspeople where they're staying, so they don't all die of lack of food. So again, this is where the cannibalism comes in. And after this like military group comes in, they see all these like limbs. They think that the town has been killing humans for food. They are punished by basically lighting the entire town ablaze by another guy who has like this fire ability, wherein the fire will never go out until all of the fuel is like completely destroyed, right? And the entire town is subject to this. So including both siblings, and whilst watching his sister being consumed by flames, her regenerative ability not fast enough to save her life. Sadly, his is. So he is stuck in this perpetual burning pain for a decade, like for years and years and years, close to a decade, before he's even able to really think, because the fastness of his body being able to regenerate means that the fire never goes out. And so he becomes this force of revenge called Fire Punch, coming to get revenge for the untimely, horrific death of everyone he knew, but mostly his sister, because that's the only person he really cared about. But then it turns into a story of redemption, and then it turns into a story of place, and it turns into a story of like who our hero is and what our hero is, and then it turns into a story of freedom and choice and self-choice versus the greater good. It's Fire Punch is way better than like I think initial reading may imply. As I said, it takes a little while for both Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man, I would say, to really get going. There's a great love that Fujimoto has for like low budget films or films in general, but especially low budget films in all of his works. And in Fire Punch specifically, there is a character who basically sees life as a large movie and is continuously filming, and coincidentally is also one of the most nuanced and well done, represented like trans characters I think I've ever seen, especially outside of like a LGBT focused manga. And that, when I was initially reading this through like the Jump website, really surprised me. There's just a lot to really appreciate with Fire Punch, more so than, as I said, is initially obvious. And like, that's not to say you have to read this. It's definitely not one that everyone can stomach. It's definitely not one that is a must read to things, right? I would say I would encourage people to try Chainsaw Man, because that has a lot of similar elements, a lot of similar themes, a lot of just as well done messages and characters and nuanced ideas and discussions as Fire Punch, with quite a few less of the in-your-face taboo topics being shoved down your throat. There's still some, but not as many. And so, I would encourage you to try Fujimoto's work, even if you don't immediately think it's for you. If you try it and you dislike it, that's totally fine. Like, that, again, not for everyone. Absolutely not for everyone. But I I don't want people to think that his works are shock for shock value, are not like, there's no value with them, no substance with them. They're just there to make you uncomfortable or make you upset or just like have, edgy, dark, gritty, cringy stuff for the sake of it. There is actually good, like, messaging, really interesting stuff within Fire Punch and, by extension, Chainsaw Man. So yeah, I think I might have one more volume of this to pick up. It's only 8 volumes in total. Maybe I have all of them. I can't really remember. But yeah, Fire Punch is one that I'm happy that I read legally through Viz's like online store or website. It's not on the Shonen Jump app because it literally has every trigger warning in the world and thus would not be suitable for the app store. But you can read the entirety of it on Shonen Jump if, like, on the website, if you do have the Shonen Jump subscription. And I encourage you to do that versus, like, jumping into buying the volumes immediately if you don't know anything about it, if you don't really know if you'll like it or anything like that, because it's a lot, and it's a lot immediately. It's in your face immediately. So yeah, Fire Punch. Switching gears, we have some Kodansha manga. The first one being volume 6 of Taku Kuwabara's Drifting Dragons. So I have volume 7 already. 6 was just on back order because obviously printing, reprints and stuff are few and far between right now in this age of COVID. But this is a adventure, fantasy, drama, food manga about the Dragoneers, or the crew of this airship called the Queen Zaza, who hunt dragons, typically as work. Dragons are seen as like a pest within society. They attack towns and disrupt travel and shipments and things like that. It is a very what is that, oil lamp kind of setting. It's obviously fantastical. And I said this with previous volumes that there's some very obvious comparisons you can make with this series and with like whaling stories, stuff like Moby Dick, stuff that follows whalers and their time on the high seas. And obviously that can be a very controversial topic historically. Like it was controversial historically. We know that thousands of beautiful animals were slaughtered for human just humanity wanting lamplight. They didn't even like eat the meat or anything like that. Very wasteful story of human history, to be honest. Let's destroy an environmentally important and let's just destroy a creature for our inconvenience. And obviously whaling is still done in Japan. It's still, it's incredibly controversial. The fishing industry in Japan in general is abhorrent and, is inexcusable. So if you're not wanting to read a story that is reminiscent of a whaling story from a country that still has a tendency to kill whales for food, but really there's no need to do so, and to do it in such abhorrent ways, I 100% understand. If that makes you uncomfortable, if that makes you not want to read this, I get it. I get it. That is totally understandable and acknowledged. I feel with although it has the aesthetics of like a whaling ship and those sorts of things, the actual approach, especially with the characters in this, for this particular airship, is more so of the Golden Kamui sort of where they kill this animal because that's their job. It's something they do. It's not done with joy. It's not done with like this excitement to kill a living creature. And then after the fact, once a dragon has been killed by this group, and sometimes they don't kill dragons. This is not just like, oh yeah, how many animals can we kill? It's not that. They treat the loss of life with respect. As I said, a huge aspect of this series is the food manga. So the dragon then becomes a meal for the crew. It's the circle of life, using everything, kind of the hunter's ideal of like, you've taken a life and now you use every aspect of that life. You honor their death and sacrifice through the usage, and that it's a complicated thing, and obviously certain people just dislike the idea of killing animals at all, but when you do so in a sustainable way, that like in Golden Kamui, how Ainu treat the hunt, how a lot of indigenous cultures treat hunting with this level of respect for that has which been hunted, and using every part of that animal. In the same way that certain vegetarians may not eat meat, but they will still use leather goods and things like that because they recognize that as a byproduct, it's better to use that than to turn it into a waste good. And it's all, it's all very complicated and all a personal moral journey for yourself. But that element is very prominent in Drifting Dragons. When a dragon is killed, the crew eats well. They make all sorts of delicious dishes in the style of what did you eat yesterday? Well, not so much what did you eat yesterday, but like Delicious in Dungeon. Food manga, right? Or Silver Spoon, again, is another, I think, apt comparison without the fantasy element. And through that, gain a greater appreciation for these creatures. Through that, making sure that the loss of life wasn't just a vicious killing for no other reason than, again, human greed or human, convenience. It's very, very good if it's something that sounds like your thing. It's a slice of life, like fantasy as well, so there's a lot of very beautiful exploration of the world, of the society, why these like dragoneers are even needed, how it's a very, the fantastical setting is really grounded and well done. The characters on the Quinzaza are great as well. I do think the crew is very likable. It's a really diverse cast of people. And there's an anime adaptation. I haven't watched it, so I don't know how good it is. I think it's a CG series, so that may have irked people off of it. I've yet to watch it. I'll get around to it at some point, but I do really enjoy this series. It's one that I follow via simulpublication on Crunchyroll, and is very, very good. And I'm glad that it did make the jump to print, because it's one that I didn't really expect to make the jump to print, but I'm sure that the recentish anime helped bridge that gap for it. So yeah, if it sounds like your thing, give it a shot. It is more than, well, I don't know what people perceive this series as, but it's not, I think, what initial premise, plot synopsis might make it seem like. I was surprised it was a food manga. Like, I went into it knowing nothing about this series, and it positively surprised me. So yeah, give it a shot if it sounds like your thing. With the fantasy from Kodansha, we have volume 7 of Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama. This is now the Eisner award-winning comic about a little witch called Coco who discovers magic, or discovers the secret behind magic, and is taken in by a older witch, becomes an apprentice, and is now learning about magic and magical society, and which is very like cloistered, secretive, and this ongoing feud between the pointed caps the pointed hats and the brimmed hats, which is great. I mean, not to place too much emphasis on things like winning prizes as a sign of quality, but the hype for this series is incredibly well deserved. The Eisner win is incredibly well deserved. It's just a beautiful series about, I mean, the possibilities of creation and creativity, and the magic system is really cool in this one. I just love all of the characters, the mystery, this ongoing development and feud between the two sides of magic, and Coco as an outsider learning about all these things and but also being a breath of fresh air to a society that has been so cloistered for so long. It's great, amazing. I love it. It's just so unbelievably good. Like, I can't emphasize how good this series is, how wonderfully it encourages creative thinking. Stuff that goes beyond like the rational, logical conclusions of established ideas and measures. Again, the idea of hard work and talent, and also breaking down this belief of being born into a community or a discipline, or being born talented versus, working towards that and trying new things and rethinking, redeveloping, finding newer, better ways to solve old problems. It's so good. It's so good. I love this series so much. It's so magical. It's magical in a way that a lot of series, I think, try but fail to capture. It's an approachable series for people of all ages. It doesn't have like an overly complicated magic system. It doesn't get overwhelmed or mired in established like fantasy magic tropes. I think even now a lot of people still like to compare any like coming of age fantasy to stuff like Harry Potter, for instance, but this really reminds me a lot of stuff like A Wizard of Earthsea. Maybe not that one, but Earthsea as a whole. The Earthsea Cycle by Ursula Le Guin, of a lot of fantasy that breaks down what it is to be magical, and this barrier to entry with magic. It, rather than, although Coco is an outsider coming in, or as a newcomer to the community, and is this fish out of water in a similar sense that like Harry Potter was, and that's how you learn about this society and whatever else. It loses the well, yeah, but magic is only available for those born to it. Only people who have magic can do magic. And I think that's a really important idea. That's a really important understanding and explanation. And then also the value of people who don't have magic in a magic society. It's so good. It's so good. I love it so much. It's beautiful. It's phenomenal. If you're not reading it, what are you doing? Honestly, like, this is not some new underground, like, series that nobody's ever heard of. This is one of the most beloved current series coming out for graphic novels and comics in general. And, you absolutely need to check it out if you haven't. We have a drawn and quarterly book, one that I was so excited for. Pre-ordered immediately and absolutely delivered what I wanted. It's fantastic. This is Shigeru Mizuki's Tonomonogatari, which is his comic adaptation of Tonomonogatari, which is basically like Japan's version of like the Grimm's fairy tales, things like that. It's a collection of traditional folklore, featuring, of course, all the weird and wonderful and creepy yokai of the country. So if you don't know anything about Mizuki, welcome to the channel. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you've survived till this long. Because I'd be surprised for a regular viewer not to know Mizuki. I talk about him a lot. He's one of the most influential mangaka in Japanese history. He basically created, or at least definitely popularized, yokai manga, supernatural manga featuring the weird and wonderful creatures of Japan's folklore. And so doing an adaptation of a book chronicling said folklore is so in character. Definitely this is Mizuki. It's not comparatively to stuff like Kitaro or even Nonba, which is autobiographical, but Kitaro, where he's discovering and expanding and building upon the existing folklore. This is just an adaptation of those old stories, of those historical retellings, or moral plays, or life lessons that are framed through the supernatural that exist in every culture. This is Japan's version of that. The Tonomonogatari is Japan's version of that. This is Mizuki's adaptation of that, and I think it's really wonderful that we've gotten this, because just knowing how much Mizuki impacted Japan's interest in media about yokai, and then also contributing to the modern folklore, the development of new yokai, is quite amazing. Yeah, I mean, this is basically just a bunch of short stories of stories that were told throughout history by Japanese people about the weird monsters that you may come across in life that cause you unhappiness, or start problems, or if you treat them well, do good stuff for you. And like with all folklore, it's actually, it's all allegory for being kind to your neighbors, or don't be jealous and steal stuff, or, behave yourself and whatever else. Right, like that's the true reasoning behind folklore. And other various works, including religious texts, is these moral guidelines, is these rules to understanding life, and also to explain weird phenomena that historically, people didn't understand. Stuff like earthquakes and tsunamis, natural disaster, disease, chronic illness, mental illness, physical disability, developmental disabilities, stuff like that as well. It's how humans throughout history have understood or rationalized those ideas, because they didn't have the scientific knowledge or the medical knowledge that we now do have in modern day. Now we can, we can tell in utero whether your child will have Down syndrome, or we can tell very early on in a child's life if they have autism or ADHD or whatever else it may be. But back then they didn't know, and so if a child was born without an arm, or very obviously not with some sort of disability, then it's easy to say, oh well, of course, because you were cursed by foxes, and because you stole a thing, right? Like that's how humanity rationalize things and explain things. And it's really interesting. That's why folklore and mythology is fascinating, because it's a look into how cultures have come to terms with issues that sometimes can't be explained away, sometimes can't be rationalized, don't have an obvious problem or obvious source of the problem. And that's why I'm very interested and invested in it. But Tonomonogatari, buy this book. Yes, there's a story about a lady having sex with a horse. So yes, it can get weird, but I would challenge that anyone, if you're weirded out by that, you obviously have never had any sort of passing experience with the Greek myths, because those are wild. All mythology, all folklore is wild, and there's always going to be some sort of bestiality in there. What are old-timey people so into that? I don't know. Really happy to have more Mizuki in English. Really happy to have this book available. And as I said, I pre-ordered it. I'm a big Mizuki fan, and this was a no-brainer for me. I'm just so happy. I love it. It's great. Buy this book. Here's to another one of my loves. But very different. Very different. We have Volume 4 of Udon's release of The Rose of Versailles by Ryoko Ikeda. This is the 4th out of 5 hardcover releases for this classic shoujo manga. This is the story of, well, it's the story of the French Revolution. Marie Antoinette coming to France as a young girl to marry Louis the 15th, and her unhappy circumstances, and sort of obviously French society during this period, and the resulting revolution by the lower classes of France. But really, this is a story of Oscar de Georges, the woman the only daughter of a palace guard or the royal army or something, who was raised as a guard, as a warrior by her father, as the only child, or at least the only child that was interested in like swordsmanship and stuff like that. And Lady Oscar, as she is known, stealing hearts everywhere. Everyone loves Lady Oscar. She's so cool and handsome and talented and strong and amazing. True Baikon right here. And she quickly becomes in charge of looking after Marie Antoinette during this period. A lonely little girl who has never really experienced anything outside of her very privileged life. And Oscar, seeing both sides of this revolution, of the people who are so cloistered in their privilege, who've never known hardship in their life, celebrating and losing any sort of perception of hardship, or not comprehending any perception of hardship. And then the lower classes who are starving on the street because of the exuberant lifestyles of the royalty. And so being amidst that skirmish and trying to figure out like what to do, how things, and obviously like spoilers for history, but things don't work out super well for Marie Antoinette. Sorry if that's a spoiler. Sorry if you didn't realize that, but French Revolution didn't end up too happy for anyone. I mean, it ended up happy for the common man in France, but the privileged folks, the lords and ladies and those with money, nah. There's the guillotine got plenty of use and was actually invented for this certain purpose. But aside from the premise, Rose of Versailles is one of the most influential manga of all time, pretty much. Is a hugely popular, incredibly still pervasive series. It has stage shows, Takarazuka shows, a million, like, this is truly a classic. Every Japanese person, especially of a certain age and younger, will know what the Rose of Versailles and or who Lady Oscar is, because it's a huge cultural phenomena that is still as relevant today as it was when it was written in the 70s. It was a pioneer of this like group, Year 24 group. There's a lot of manga that came out of Year 24 that have had huge influence and impact on manga in general, and really pushed and proved the quality and of shoujo comics in a time where even shonen comics were very samey and not a lot going on in them and no real interesting stories being told. Shoujo manga filled those gaps. It also came along with the boom in interest in classic settings, along with stuff like Heart of Thomas and such stuff. So like it is part of a much larger conversation, a much larger influence and impact that shoujo manga has had on manga, full stop, but is ultimately and will continue to do so. Continue to be one of the most well-known, beloved, recognizable, influential manga series ever. And I feel like it's a gift that we've gotten such beautiful editions from Udon. It only took them 5 years, but we got there in the end. I will give... They're beautiful editions. I will not take that away from them. It was a bit of a wait, but I think manga fans should have learnt patience by this point, considering. And I feel like if you consider yourself a manga collector, insofar as you want every title that is important, especially historically important, stuff that's had an impact on the manga industry, if you want award-winning manga, if you just want some of the best there is, if you focus on collector's editions and fancy editions of comics, I feel like if you're a manga fan and you haven't at least read, you don't have to own it, but if you haven't read Rose of Versailles, you're missing a huge chunk of context to some of the most iconic visuals, storylines, character tropes. There's so much that has come out of Versailles that has influenced later series, that you have definitely seen, consumed, read, and probably didn't realize was a direct homage to Rose of Versailles, because there's a lot of it, a lot out there. And yeah, I feel like if you're a collector in the sense that you want every book every book that's been put out, or every fancy book that's been put out, or every series that you know is important to manga history, however you organize your collection and collect books, you would be amiss to not have Rose of Versailles in the collection, because it is so important and so good, and just has stood the testament of time. Yeah. Rose of Versailles by Ryoko Ikeda. I don't think I flipped it open. It's also, just fabulous. Look at that. 70s shoujo. Amazing. Gorgeous. I love. It's so dramatic. So beautiful. Look at that paneling. Phenomenal. I love it. This has had a fantastic job with the lettering, this is archival, quality paper and all that such. It's got color pages and everything else. Oh, the drama, I love it. Yeah, this is a great series, and I would encourage you all to read it. It's well worth the investment, and an absolute joy and privilege that we've finally gotten it available in English. I have a couple Yuri manga. The first being volume 8 of Bloom Into You by Nakatani Neo. This is the final volume of this series. I'm not going to open too much. I know it gets a little bit spicy at the end here. I have not completed this series. I'm actually a couple volumes behind, to be honest. But this is the story of two high school girls, one who has recently started high school, the other who becomes the student council president. And initially they become kind of friends, sort of. They see themselves as kindred spirits, because our protagonist, the first year, she's struggling with this idea of falling in love, she's never experienced love or a crush or whatever else in the ways that songs and movies and books and whatever else have always portrayed them. And so she, for a while, she kind of considers herself broken as someone who can't love. Obviously, there's a lot of allusion there to aromanticism or asexuality, however you wanna package that one. And she kind of sees, this older girl admits to the same thing. She admits that she's never really felt love, or an interest in people in a way that you're quote unquote supposed to, as deemed by media and other people's explanations of the emotion. So they're a little bit of kindred spirits in that sense, but fairly early on, this older girl admits that she's kind of fallen in love at first sight with this younger girl, to which is very confusing for our main character. She doesn't really know how to feel, but ultimately she's willing to not put up with this other girl's feelings, but allow her to feel these emotions. She's not going to get weirded out by the idea of her feeling romantically towards her, and then obviously the development of their relationship. This is a interesting series. I really enjoy this one, despite being behind on it and not up to date, having read it. It also has a light novel spin-off series focusing on another one of the high school girls. Neither of our main characters. It also features, I think there's a lot of really great representation here, with another more obvious asexual, aromantic character. He's great, love him. As well as an older adult relationship, lesbian relationship, that's done wonderfully. And acts as a mentor character for the various young women who are struggling with their own identity, their own sexuality. It's super good. And I've seen the anime. I just recently, like last month or the month before. It was very good, solid adaptation of a solid chunk of the story. And yeah, I mean, what to say aside from that? If you enjoy Yuri, if you don't mind series that are a little bit longer, at 8 volumes, this is definitely worth the read. If you're looking for, and I say this with the asterisks that I haven't finished it, and I'm only about halfway through the series, but if you're wanting representation of the idea or of aromanticism or asexuality, in a romantic series, romance series, then give this one a look, both for the protagonist as well as one of the side characters. Maybe more so for him than for our main character. I don't know, because I don't quite know how that's developed and handled by the end of it. I think there's a lot of validation for certain expressions of feeling and relationships and love, and this idea of platonic interests versus romantic as well. It just does a lot of things really well, and I like it a lot, and I'm happy to be able to finish it. Who knows when I'll actually sit down and read it? I don't know, but it's good to have it completed in the collection finally. So we have the other Yuri title that I got for this month, and that is How Do We Relationship Volume 2 by Tamiful. This is an ongoing story about a young woman who, after going to university, she, throughout her life, she has realized she's a lesbian, but so she hasn't really had much opportunity to date. anyone in her small town in Japan. So when she gets to university, her outgoing friend kind of suggests, hey, why we get along, why don't we date each other? We don't really have any other options here. So it's about their relationship. They're very physically compatible, but they all do have some ups and downs in their relationship in other aspects. So it explores that. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in regards to, obviously, being in your first proper relationship, communication, handling stuff like jealousy, things like that, and the threat of being outed, how you talk about your sexuality with the people that you care about versus others who maybe don't understand. There's a lot to enjoy with this series. It's quite popular in Japan. Tamiful has a really lovely art style as well. It comes with a bit of spiciness too. These are adult women. They are, well, late 19, 20-year-old women. So they perfectly normal college experience insofar as like how they interact with the people they're interested in, their friendships, their various outings, and it's just really it's a solid little series, and I'm glad to have some more ongoing Yuri that I'm following because I do enjoy Yuri a lot, but I'm a little bit picky insofar as like the class S trope stuff, and I'm glad we're getting more diverse titles, especially regarding university students and working women and stuff like that as well. So, How Do We Relationship by Tamiful. I haven't had the opportunity to sit down and read this one yet. I've just been kind of waiting to get like 3-4 volumes, and then there's only 4 volumes out in Japan so far, I think. But have the opportunity to read multiple volumes at once versus waiting with an extended period between volumes and reading it as I go. So, yeah. How Do We Relationship by Tamiful. It's very good. I have read the first volume in saying that, and I liked it a lot. It'll be interesting to see how this is going, which direction he decides to take. The BL, because there is also BL this month, as per usual. Like, shouldn't be a surprise. But first up is the third and final volume of I Hear the Sunspot Limit by Yuki Fumino. There's a sequel to this, currently ongoing, but it's the final volume of this Limit series, which is actually the second sequel to the I Hear the Sunspot franchise. So the original is I Hear the Sunspot, then there's I Hear the Sunspot Theory of Happiness, which is then followed by Limit volumes 1 to 3, and the new stuff, sequel to this, is like summer, spring, winter, autumn, or like seasons or whatever it is, which has not yet been licensed. Well, I'm sure it's been licensed by One Piece Books, but it's only got 3 chapters out in Japan, so we're not going to see it for a while. But this is a ongoing story about initially two university students who are in the same year. One who is always looking for part-time work. His stomach is a black hole, bottomless pit. So he's constantly working. He lives with his grandfather. He's always working on jobs because he can never really get enough food money. And he's quite loud and energetic and boisterous and such things. But he comes across a job at his university as a note taker, where he basically takes notes for another student who has partial deafness, is hard of hearing, whatever, hearing loss, however you want to phrase it, and obviously needs assistance with classes. So he agrees to become this other student's note taker in exchange for delicious foods. He makes him lunch and brings him lunch every day in exchange, which is great for him because, as I said, he loves food and is a bottomless pit, black hole stomach. And soon they become friends, and it's obviously for our main character, it's really his first interaction with someone with disability, and especially a kind of hidden disability like deafness. And so they become friends, and then over time their relationship develops to something a little less friendly, a little more romantic. But oh my goodness, this is the slowest slow burn in the history of the universe. Well, that's not true, but it's a very slow burn. It's quite sweet, bittersweet, a phenomenal representation of disability and the deaf community. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is more so in line with stuff like Perfect World, where it actually shows multiple perspectives on the deaf community and the deaf experience. It goes into sign language and the usage of sign language and communication between people. Obviously, communication is a huge, huge theme within this series, as it is in stuff like A Silent Voice, where deafness is also, used, and a sign of affection as well. But those aren't, they have deaf characters, and A Silent Voice more so has this issue than A Sign of Affection. But it's not really about deafness. It features a deaf character, but it's about, well, for A Silent Voice, it's about redemption and bullying and otherness and reconnecting and healing trauma, etc., etc., etc. A Sign of Affection is about communication, is a bit more obviously romantic and develops a lot faster in that aspect. But as of right now, doesn't have a huge diverse representation of sign language users, deaf people, things like that. We really only have one deaf character. We have a couple characters who use sign language, but most of which are hearing, and then the aspect of communication is very reliant on like writing versus using sign. Whereas I Hear the Sunspot, it has that aspect as well, and for our main character who does have hearing loss or is hard of hearing, partial deafness, progressive deafness, which came on later in his life, he struggles a lot with that because he obviously has a partial lifetime experience of being able to hear, and so the idea of losing his hearing over time is quite scary, and not knowing if he'll be able to communicate with the same people and the people that he cares about in the ways that he has done so far, again, reminds me a lot of the male protagonist in Perfect World and his own struggles with his physical disability and how that impacted his life. But in both this series and that series, there's multiple perspectives. There's multiple people with deafness or hearing loss, some who've never had the ability to hear, never used anything but sign, those who communicate with actual like Japanese sign language, JSL, and then those who use the easier like finger spelling type of sign language, and how those interact, and then the deaf community as a vibrant and able community that just doesn't kind of exist with completely cohesively with the hearing world, and how that can be fine, actually. Like, just because you can hear doesn't mean you're inherently better or smarter or whatever else. Yeah, it's a fantastic series. The romance is also good. These boys are good boys. It's also a really approachable BL, I think. There's nothing, as of right now, there's nothing explicit in it. As I said, it's a slow burn. You really feel the initial building of this relationship through their friendship, and then their coming, like, mutual understanding and discussion of disability and how that influences our main character and his path in life too. It's super good. I really love this series. I'm so happy that One Piece Books has been releasing this, and it's also super thick. You get your money's worth with this one. Holy moly. Did I open it up? I don't remember. Beautiful artwork as well. I think there's a lot to love with this series. Makes you cry. Makes me cry, at least. I don't know if it'll make you cry, but there's a lot going on. It's also just really sweet too. Definitely worth the investment if you're interested in stories about disability, in representation of disability, BL manga, or if you're interested in trying a BL manga but don't know where to start, you're a little bit intimidated, you don't want anything with like super toxic tropes, or is like very overtly, obviously explicit, and give this one a shot. It's a great starting point. Give this franchise a shot. Maybe not volume 3 of Limit. You're not gonna understand if you start with this volume. But yeah, definitely try the series if you have the opportunity. And yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. Sweet and cute little BL, one shot, one and done, was This Wonderful Season with You by Atsuko Yusen. This is put out by Tokyo Pop. This is the story of a geeky, dorky guy who's part of the like computer engineering club or something, which is in danger of being disbanded because there's only 3 members, so they're recruiting for new members. Who runs into this very stoic but popular, good-looking, handsome guy who accidentally runs into him. The flyers scatter everywhere, and he helps them pick them up and returns them. And our main character is just absolutely awestruck by this. It's kind of an immediate interest, attraction, falling in love, although he doesn't necessarily realize it immediately. And this other boy who is so cool and like amazing, and that our main character has so much respect for and interest in, decides to join the computer science club as kind of a honorary member. The rest of the club don't really understand why, and he doesn't really get what they do. He's not interested in any of their projects or any of the club activities. He just kind of takes the opportunity to join a club to get the school to stop annoying him about it, because we find out that he has kind of a complicated history. He was an up-and-coming athlete before injury, and he's been kind of trying to figure out his place since that. And so, friendship forms and romance blossoms, and thus the story is told. We have a bit of a spicy chapter at the end, and it's perfectly done in this one book. I will say that I do prefer the other series from this creator, which is Dekoboku Sugar Days. But that's because I'm just inherently biased towards childhood friends to lovers stuff. But this is also good. I do think that this is worth reading, especially if you do like Dekoboku Sugar Days. if you like kind of family drama resolution stuff and supportive partners, romantic or otherwise too, I think it's just overall a really sweet, lovely series. Again, your mileage may vary with the fact that it's a Tokyo Pop release. I know that definitely like makes me sigh and hope that they're not doing terrible stuff now, because I don't like to support that. But as always, I've said it every time I've bought a Tokyo Pop release, if they license something I want and am interested in, I am not going to be a hypocrite. I'm going to buy it. I just hope that they're not screwing creators out of their original works. I'm hoping that they're paying their staff correctly. I hope they're not just doing all of the bad stuff that they inherently did originally the first time around. And I just wish they'd kick Stu Levy out and show him the door and say, bye, see you never, just get out of here. But they won't do that, sadly. If they do, then I will absolutely buy Tokyo Pop's books without any issue. But right now, it's like, I hand over my money in a clenched fist very, very reluctantly, but ultimately, they get my money. Yeah, but regardless of Tokyo Pop's issues with the company, this wonderful season with you was great. A majority of their BL catalog, especially the stuff that I've read, there's been a couple that I'm like, this is fine. Probably not worth buying or not worth rereading. But majority is actually really good, and which makes this such a painful existence. So yeah, this wonderful season with you. Some Sublime titles that are covered in plastic, and I'm not going to take them off because I haven't read these, and both these series are ones that absolutely earn their ratings logo, like the explicit content warning. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep them in plastic for now. The first one is volume 2 of Meguru Hinohara's therapy game. This is the second and final volume of this series. This is a spin-off of Secret XXX, which is a single volume. The couple featured in this are the brothers of the couple in the original series. A little more complicated, nuanced. Secret XXX is good. I like it a lot, but it's also very sweet. It's also like the interest in each other is immediately reciprocated, and there's nothing too dramatic or bad happening, no major drama, whereas this one definitely has a bit more going on in regards to conflict and drama and watching the relationship develop from people who like don't even know each other or aren't even interested in each other inherently to being a couple, right? Like being together. So yeah, I got into Hinohara's manga a little bit later. I didn't pick up Secret XXX until early this year. It had been out a couple months by that point, but I heard nothing but good things, so I knew that I would be getting it at some point, probably, and I've heard nothing but even better things about this one. So I'm looking forward to actually getting into it. I haven't started reading it because I was just going to wait for both volumes to read it all at once. Finally, for manga, oh my goodness, and this again has plastic on it. I'm not going to take it off because this is a very spicy manga. This is Jealousy Volume 3 by Scarlett Berrico. This is a spin-off or prequel spin-off of two characters, Yakuza characters, who are so it's a spin-off of 4th generation head, Tatsuki, whatever his name is, which is a single volume, very good. dark and like Scarlet Barracuda, man, I love her, but also her fetishes are not my fetishes. So like half the time, the explicit stuff, I'm like, okay, that's like I don't find it sexy, but I also do really like the writing. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. Her a lot of her stuff, especially this series and related works, are Yakuza focused, so a little bit darker, a little bit more dramatic and gritty and not super well adjusted, wonderful relationships. But this is a prequel to that series because one of the characters is the son of like this Yakuza boss. And the said Yakuza boss has like one of his members of the group who's like totally infatuated with him, and like an unhealthy interest and dedication to him. And so this is their story. This is their story from 20, 30 years prior, when they were young men in the 80s, and just the messed up relationship drama that they have. This weird like push-pull between them, and very obvious attraction, but ultimately like we know that the relationship isn't going to go anywhere. They also know that the relationship isn't going to go anywhere. It's messy and dramatic and sexy and it's great, but oh boy, yeah, this is this series, and it, even more so than like Fourth Generation Head, because the couple in Fourth Generation Head is quite sweet. It's not messy. There's drama and dark shit happening, but it's not related to the couple. This is all of the mess in relation to the relationship. This is not a well-adjusted, like, you're rooting for this couple by the end of it type of story. No. Not at all. And so, I think this recently finished in Japan. 5th volume is the final one. I might just wait until I have all 5 volumes. Again, I've read the first one, and so I know that I enjoy it. I enjoy Scarlet Barracuda's work anyway, as I said, but I might just wait until I have all the volumes and read it all at once. Some light novels this month. Maybe a surprise series in light novels for people, but maybe not, because I've been kind of reassessing my opinion on this series a bit, and I'm actually interested in getting into this one. So anyway, I'm gonna just bite the bullet and say it. This is Sword Art Online by Reki Kawahara. This is obviously hugely popular, ongoing light novel series about our main character, Kirito, who is an elite gamer, who, on the launch of a new virtual reality game called Sword Art Online, is caught, along with every other launch player, in this deathly game in this world of Sword Art Online, where if you die in the game, you die in real life. And if you try to if someone tries to unplug the game console, you die in real life. So it's this survival game, set in this like fantasy sword swinging, RPG basically. And it's about him and the various people he meets throughout the course of the game, and his growing relationship with his spoilers for a very old series. Like, this series is 10, 20 years old at this, maybe 15 years old at this point. I don't think it's that much of a spoiler, but his girlfriend Asuna, who's on the cover here, as well as a bunch of the other people who he meets along the way, friends and enemies alike. And at the end of book 2, their escape from Sword Art Online. But all of these people are elite gamers, so that doesn't mean that they stop playing games just because SAO is over. They continue and fix problems and play games and enjoy themselves and get way too caught up in video games, and sometimes that's fine. That's all okay. So this is the Uncrowned Arc. This is like the actual Sword Art Online storyline, wherein Asuna and Kirito meet, wherein they're trying to escape from a video game that will literally kill them, and ultimately they're stuck in for 2 years? 2.5 years? Some crazy amount of time. And obviously how that impacts people, how that would influence your life. It's pretty, like, SAO has its issues, but it does acknowledge a lot of things, I will say. So that's volumes 1 and 2, which is the Sword Art Online storyline. Then I'm still waiting for volume 4, but I also have volume 3 of the series, which is Fairy Dance. Volume 4 is also the second half of Fairy Dance, which is the arc that, like, in the anime, really people disliked. And I absolutely understand why. There's a introduction of certain things. Asuna becomes a lot less of a character. Not real sister, or cousin sister being implied being in love with Kirito. There's a lot of stuff that you're like, okay, that's you didn't have to have that. We could have done without that one. But I think that's mostly contained to this particular storyline. So, and I know what I'm getting into because I have watched not all of Sword Art Online. I haven't gotten to Alicization yet, but I've read or watched everything else. So I'm not going into this blind. I don't think it'll make me angry. And then I have volumes 5 and 6, which is Gun Gale, or no, Phantom Bullet, but the game is Gun Gale Online. So again, we have a different VR game, and this one, it has Kirito as a androgynous avatar character, and they, instead of swords, most of the characters use guns, but Kirito, as a elite gamer who only has sword skills, is like, nah, lightsaber. Again, I've seen the show, so I know what's coming, and I know what it's about. It's not going to be a surprise. But yeah, so I actually am pretty keen to get into this. I've said it before, I will say it again. I think Sword Art Online gets a bad rap because although it does have, like, there's certainly things to criticize about it, but comparatively to especially light novel protagonists, their personalities currently, the growth in isekai and how the characters interact in that, the continuous harems and stuff that are dominating isekai right now. A lot of people back in the day, in a very contrarian way, would just say, like, Sword Art Online is terrible, and, there's nothing good about it, and if you like it, you're wrong and it's stupid. And I'm not gonna say that I don't love Sword Art Online. I don't think it's the best thing ever made. But it's also not the worst thing ever made. If you've seen any of the stuff that's coming out right now, that's popular, Sword Art Online, and Kirito especially as the protagonist, are head and shoulders above a lot of these schlubs who are populating light novels right now. I'm not a gamer as well, so, like, I don't find much of the game terminology or stuff that interesting, but I do find a lot of the other character stuff pretty interesting. Again, yes, there's a lot of problems with how Asuna is treated in certain arcs, but she also later does have dedicated arcs to herself. This isn't just a Kirito-dominated story, And also, he's just a good boy. Like, he's just nice. You can understand why all these girls are falling in love with him, because he's a genuinely good person who's trying to help people. And also, there's never going to be a risk of him, like, uh-oh, I don't know who I want to date, because he's already dating someone and is dedicated to his girlfriend, which, again, can be few and far between. He's a better breed than Araragi from Monogatari, but it's the same sense with the harem element, in that you know that none of the other girls have a chance because the romantic relationship between the established couple is so strong. And really, there's no jealousy born from that either, because, again, the characters trust each other. That's a weird thing to say about a series like this, but it's not an incorrect statement. I'm also keen to, like, actually get into Alicization, because I like Yujiro, and I want to experience that story. I've heard, Sword Art Online isn't like a very beloved series anymore, but I will defend to my dying day that the first arc, like the original Sword Art Online, had some incredible moments, the writing wasn't fabulous. It's not like it's not going to be changing your life, or if it is, then please experience more media. But watching the anime, because I watched the first episode as it premiered, there was such immense tension. There was a lot to be worried about. Episode 4 with the Black Cat Guild was so affecting. And again, the growing interactions between Asuna and Kirito over time. I'm not the biggest fan of Yui. Their like AI fairy child daughter that they saved. But she's also not the worst. I just dislike the grating child character typically. It's I decided to give Sword Art Online a fair shot. As I said, I enjoy the anime for what it is. It's schlocky. It's got some great action. Great soundtrack. I actually do like a lot of the characters. Plot-wise, I think that Reki Kawahara has gotten like a lot better throughout the course of his career at writing. And just, there's a lot to like in Sword Art Online, and I have gotten a greater appreciation for that now, having had to live through this current trend of like slavery isekai and light novel protagonists who unabashedly want to commit sexual assaults and or rape on characters, who are straight up in love with their siblings, characters who are ultimately really bad people and have nothing likable about them, but they get away with everything because they're the main character. Sometimes the simple story about a teenage boy being an elite gamer can just be that. He can have a normal, like, romance with his girlfriend, and the problems come from, the bad situation that they may be in, but they work together. And yes, he has elite gamer skills, but this is an actual video game. It's not some weird isekai world that uses video game mechanics for some reason. And if nothing else, Sword Art Online has an in-text explanation as to why Kirito has good sword skills. It has an in-text explanation as to why he knows so much about Sword Art Online and can get so far and be like one of the best players very quickly. In text, there's the explanation. It's not just like, oh, I play video games. It's like, no, I was a beta tester for this game, and so I know the mechanics. I know how this works. Oh, I like using swords because I grew up in a kendo like dojo. I've done this like actual sword swinging for a large part of my life. And yes, I'm just like I'm not into it that much anymore because I'm an elite gamer, but at least I know how swords work in real life. And also I play video games, so yes, I do understand game mechanics to a certain extent. Um I don't know. I just decided that like I'm gonna give it a shot. If I don't like it, then that's fine. I like if I don't like it to the point that I'm like this is the worst thing, I need to get rid of it, then I will. But I doubt that's gonna be the case. And I do know that I like a lot of elements of the story already, again from the adaptation. And I'm interested to read Kawahara's writing because I haven't actually read any of his other series either. The Accelerator or Excel World either. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm not too worried though, to be honest. That's everything that I got for this month of April. A lot of stuff. Boosted definitely by the fact that I bought an entire series. Quite a few art books, several light novels that were kind of a snap decision, but hopefully a positive decision. Some really wonderful independent manga, some great conclusions to series. Not too many debuts, I don't think. Did I have a debut? I had a couple one-shot stuff. One and dones. Oh yeah, I had a debut with the Apothecary Diaries. But otherwise, just a really broad mix as per usual. Thanks, guys, for hanging out and listening to me talk for a disgustingly long time about all of these series. Hopefully, there's some stuff in here that interests you. Let me know your thoughts, opinions, feelings on any of these titles, whether you love them, hate them, agree, or totally disagree. I love reading your comments and do try to respond to as many as I can, and even if I don't respond, I do read them, so, you know, I appreciate the effort. If you enjoy this video and are interested in more content from me, you could consider subscribing. Don't feel obligated, though, because I don't post that often, although I do a weekly live stream where I talk about all of the books that I read for that week, for a disgustingly long time. If you're wanting more up-to-date and current information on the stuff that I've actually been reading that week, new stuff, so as well you don't have to necessarily wait for the end of the month when I talk about it in my haul videos. I also post art book overviews as well as first impressions videos and recommendation videos, as well as co-hosting a podcast, Read Right to Left, with my wonderful friend Ray from Whimsical Pictures, which is posted on this channel as well as on pretty much every podcasting platform out there, where we talk about manga, creators, genres, themes, series specific stuff, and we've had a lot of fun with that over the last 2 years. That comes out monthly. And I think that's it. Oh, also you can follow me on Twitter if you're wanting to communicate directly with me, or you are just interested to see what I spew into the universe online via text. But otherwise, yeah, it's been great. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye till then.